stained glass windows are enjoying a renaissance all over the world, and artists are taking a fresh look at this ancient art and adapting it to contemporary use in design. To see how the craft is being pursued today, we visited the famous Judson Studios in Southern California, where the Judson family has been creating exciting windows since the turn of the century. We also went to Bern, Switzerland, to visit the time-honored Reich & Company, whose windows grace countless structures on the continent. The walls of the Reich Studio are covered with scale miniatures and medallions, a record of past achievements reflecting the diverse needs of department stores, manufacturing plants, churches, private homes, wherever glass is used and beauty is sought to enhance existing architecture. No matter what size the window, the technique for making it remains the same. Here are a couple of windows awaiting the insertion of lead, and others leaded and complete, ready to be installed. The first step in designing a window is to visit its future location, to observe surroundings, trees, possible obstructions to light, and to get accurate measurements. From the springing of the arch to the base, the width of the light, making allowance for whatever sustaining bars will be required. And from these measurements, a template is made. The artist must come up with the right design, the right concept, the right window for this building. And he must convey symbolically the idea or theme or incident desired. After his initial preliminary sketches, he makes his serious drawings on tough Bristol board. When a commission involves several windows of the same size and dimension, the artist can first prepare all the frames, showing the circles, quatrefoils, and lozenges, and insert the figures later. The drawing that is presented for approval is in full color and reflects a scale miniature of the final window. The scale of 1 inch to 1 foot is most frequently used. Once approved, an enlargement of the miniature can be made in several ways. The Judson Studios make their sketches a very close approximation, and an artist converts the sketch onto tracing paper the actual size and dimensions of the window. When the two sides of the window are identical, the artist completes only one side to the last detail, and the other side is simply duplicated when the cut line is traced from it. The cut line is the full-size drawing showing final let pattern, bar arrangement, and panel divisions. When the window is too large and unwieldy in one piece, as this would be, the logical divisions for easy cartage and installation are shown. The Reich Studio uses an enlarger, which blows up the picture onto a tracing paper. Since their original color sketch was made in exact proportions, by following the lines of the projected image precisely, the artist ends up with a cartoon the exact size and shape of the window. However, no matter what the method, great care is exercised to ensure the accuracy of the measurements, for an error at this critical stage might not be discovered until the window is ready for installation. A photographic blow-up can also be made, and would ensure exact duplication, of course, but it's very expensive. Here are some of the tools you will be working with in order to complete the job. A pair of scissors with a double blade that cuts away 3/32 of an inch to allow for the heart of the lead. A two-bladed adjustable cutter that serves the same purpose. The diamond glass cutter is expensive, but an excellent investment because of its long lifespan. Other glass cutters are used only until the edge is blunted and then discarded, but a diamond glass cutter is a forever thing. The grossing irons are a special form of pliers that grows or bite off the glass. And the nippers rongeur the jagged edges that didn't break clean. Rough edges are further smoothed by the 3-edged file. The lead cam used to hold the glass pieces together is corrugated and forms the letter H on its side. It is very soft and malleable. To smooth out and press down the edges of the lead, a larrikin can be used. From the full-size drawing, which has been done on tracing paper, 2 additional copies are made on manila. The first to serve as a cut line for use throughout the remaining stages of the window. The second as a pattern for the cutting of the glass. And the third on tracing paper is filed away for future use and reference. With the double-bladed scissors, the pattern is cut along the black lead lines, eliminating the 3/32 of an inch for the lead. Each piece is given a number to designate the color of glass to be used. After the individual patterns for the glass are cut, they are replaced on the cartoon, much like a jigsaw puzzle, in a portable tray that is easily carried to the next stage, and the next pair of hands, those of the glazier, probably you. Antique glass, so called because the manufacturing process we use today is virtually the same as that employed by the ancient Egyptians, is made by blowing a small bubble or pouch. The pouch is blown further until it assumes a cylindrical shape, and the ends are cracked off, creating a muff, from which muff glass derives its name. A cut is made along the full length of the muff to cause a fracture, and the muff is placed into the oven and slowly heated until the glass becomes flat. Flashed glass can create sensational effects. Color plays an important part in the symbology of windows. White is the symbol of purity and peace. Black, of despair and sorrow. Gray, of humility. Red, of love, power, and fire. Yellow, the sun and fruitfulness. Green, spring, hope, and victory. Blue, heaven, constancy, and truth. And violet, suffering and penance. Color selection becomes a much easier task when one has small squares of glass to handle, rather than the large sheets that are stored in these vertical bins. Remember that as many as 500 or 600 colors can go into one window. If, as happens in man-made glass, bubbles and impurities occur, they only add to the interest. Perfect machine-made glass of uniform thickness and color is not at all desirable. One type of glass has color throughout the entire thickness. Another is a laminated glass where the main bubble is taken out of the pot and dipped into color to form a thin film. The bubble can be twirled until the glass is of an even color, or it can be left unevenly clinging to the bubble to create a streaked effect like the muff and the bottles you just saw. This streaked effect is lovely to use in depicting the folds of garments. The strong red color is achieved by adding selenium. Blue comes from cobalt and yellow from cadmium. Ordinary table sugar will give us a rich amber, and silver nitrate, when fired, becomes metallic gold in color. Scientists tell us that the flow of glass is measurable in microns. Over a long period of time, the window will thicken at the bottom and thin out at the top. ready to start the actual cutting. In the hands of an expert, the process looks deceptively simple. But only experience can teach the novice the pressure that must be exerted to get the scratch just right. And only experience can teach one to cut a curved line in one stroke. The trick is in practice and a good cutting tool, which is most essential to keep the skid or the drift down to a minimum. In using the grozing iron and file to rougeur the rough edges, be sure to hold the glass away from the eyes. Better yet, wear glasses. That innocent-looking cloud is simply fine glass and can be extremely injurious to the eyes as well as the lungs. Also, do your cutting over a box so you don't have cullet, the splintered shards of glass, underfoot. Each cutout of glass is replaced in its proper spot on the cartoon. Beeswax is the most frequently used method for sticking the pieces of glass to the glass easel. Heat it until it is melted. The wax is dropped on all the junctions of the glass pieces, and in this way the artist can work with the unleaded window held up against the light. Plasticine or modeling clay is used when the window is large and hangs on a pulley. In order to achieve certain effects, it is sometimes necessary to use acid on the glass to eliminate color on certain areas. We have here simulated the process. Hydrochloric acid is used, and protective gloves, glasses, and apron must be worn. Ordinary glass tape or wax is placed on the parts on which the original color is to be retained. In the acid, the exposed glass develops a white scum, and a brush is used to wipe away this scum and with it the color. Removed from the acid bath, again with gloves, the tape is stripped off, the glass is rinsed immediately, and the acid is strained and stored away for future use. We're ready now for the paint, which is made of iron oxide with a little flux in it, glass ground as fine as powder, and gum to help it fuse to the glass. Colors range from a light brown to black. Mix with enough water to make a paste, and work with a palette knife or muller until the mixture is silken smooth. It might take an hour to achieve the proper uniformity of texture. The lines of the hands and the head and the folds in the drapes of the garments all are called tracery, because the glass is placed on the original cartoon and the lines are traced or painted on the glass. It is suggested not to fire the tracing onto the glass at this point, for firing now would fuse the paint to the glass and make it impossible to make later corrections. For purposes of tracery only, mix the paint with vinegar in a consistency of 1 part vinegar to 3 parts paint, and the tracery will dry in about 24 hours. Corrections, if needed, can be made, and the first mat can be applied over it. For matting, however, dilute the paint with water, not vinegar as for the tracery, and apply the mixture evenly to the surface of the window with a soft, large Badger or Hereford brush. When time is of the essence, even an ordinary blower can hasten the process of drying, so that whatever lines have to be painted can be done. When the paint is dry, it is a simple process to scratch out patterns in the paint with a quill or a dowel, or even a needle, a comb, or the wrong end of a $20 brush sharpened to a fine point. A full-tone painting is not recommended at this time, for over-energetic application of the brush over the tracery might mar the fine delineation of features and details. When the first painting has been fired, the second painting will be much easier. The tracery has become fused with the glass and cannot be moved or removed by further brushing and shading. After the application of the second painting, drying, and the final toning, note how the colors can be deepened or lightened to achieve harmonious blending. When dry, remove any excess paint from the edges, or you'll end up with a piece of glass much larger than the original measurement. We're ready to fire. On an asbestos tray, the pieces are placed paint side up. Fusion of glass and paint occurs at about 600 degrees centigrade or 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. In a preheated gas or electric kiln, it takes roughly 10 minutes to fire the glass. Not hot enough or long enough to melt the glass, but hot enough to vitrify the paint. When a slight sheen occurs on the glass, the paint has melted and fusion has taken place. The glass is cooled slowly and in degrees in order to prevent chipping or cracking in the cold air. The entire cooling process takes about 2 hours. Fired glass is more brittle than unfired glass and should be handled accordingly. Now, if there is further tracing or delineation of design, another firing, of course, will be required. And this is all done before the leading, since lead has a low melting point and cannot tolerate the heat of the oven. Some of the larger studios prepare and extrude their own lead. It is made in widths varying from 1/8 to 5/8 of an inch and stored away for future needs. The preferred widths for this work are 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. For the leading process, the cartoon is spread out. 2 pieces of batten are nailed to the bench at right angles, and long cams or strips of lead are run inside the boards. The first corner piece of glass is inserted and coaxed into the H groove with an oyster knife. Another strip of lead is cut and fitted around the glass and held in place by glazier nails. It's a good idea to have a wire brush lying nearby to clean out the grooves in the lead cams. Work up and out like a fan until the section is finished. When the leading is completed, there is still space between glass and lead and a good deal of rattle, which must be eliminated. Either oleic acid or plain tallow is dropped onto all the lead junctions to work as a flux for the solder. The soldering iron should be tinned, a coating put on it to make it work smoothly, by dipping the iron first into soldering salt and then a little solder. With one side completed, the glass is turned over carefully and the process repeated. The next stage is waterproofing the window. This is done by mixing equal parts of powdered whitening and plaster of Paris, 1 part lampblack, and a little red lead, with boiled oils thinned with turpentine. The waterproofing is applied generously to the entire panel with a good stiff brush. Not only does it serve to make the windows watertight, but it removes the shiny look of the lead which would detract from the design. With the use of sawdust or whiting, the excess waterproofing is removed and the glass is cleaned. Orange sticks are used to clean out the surplus cement. The edges are pressed down and the window is ready for installation. The glazier inserts the heavy sandal bars spaced about 1 foot apart to support the window over its entire height. And wherever necessary, he will solder copper ties to the panels so the window is held firmly against the buffeting of strong winds. The second portion of our film deals with faceted glass as made at the Judson Studios. For this process, the final full-scale cartoon is laid out in almost abstract form. The broad black lines allowing space for the matrix, in this case the epoxy resin. Here too, each section is numbered to clue the glazier on the color of glass to be used. The dowels, the slabs of colored glass, are made by pouring the liquid glass into molds measuring approximately 8 inches and 1 or 2 inches thick. The colors are bold and extravagantly beautiful. One means of cutting the dowels is the diamond tip masonry saw. Since the glass becomes untouchably hot when it's being cut, a constant flow of water is used to cool it. The masonry saw is such a precision tool that it is even possible to cut a glass bottle in half. But such precision is not always desirable. Perhaps the window calls for the less precise cut by eye. The merest of scratches with a diamond glass cutter on the surface of the dowel is enough to weaken it so that the glass breaks clean on the line of the scratch when tapped against the steel wedge. Since the thickness of the glass does not permit painting and firing to create shadings, the artist facets the glass to create highlights. This is done by sharply striking the edge of the glass with a tungsten or carbaloid-tipped hammer. And even while he's faceting the glass, the artist gives it shape. When all the glass pieces have been cut, they are transported on boards to the room where the epoxy is to be poured. For the sake of economy, several windows are accumulated for the pouring session. To accommodate the epoxy, a wooden frame is made 1/8 of an inch smaller than the opening of the space it is to fit. The frame is placed around the copy of the cartoon, which is laid flat on the workbench so the liquid epoxy will be completely controlled within each frame. Carnauba wax or Vaseline has been applied liberally to the surface of the cut line so the epoxy and glass won't stick, and the chunky glass pieces are placed on their proper spots. Grease is not a satisfactory base because the epoxy soaks it up and is weakened by it. About 1/4 of an inch of sand is sifted evenly into the spaces between the glass chunks. The sand gives the exterior of the window a fine textured finish rather than a flat look. In the meantime, the epoxy, which is 50% sand and 50% resin, is being mixed. A catalytic agent, the hardener, is added, which causes an exothermic reaction, a chemical change that is accompanied by a liberation of heat that causes the epoxy to become very hard. The epoxy is transferred to small containers and poured carefully about 5/8 of an inch thick into the spaces. The versatility of epoxy is that it can be poured into a hairline groove as easily as into a space an inch or so wider, as design dictates. A steady hand cuts down on the cleanup time, for whatever epoxy gets on the glass must be chipped off with hammer and chisel after it dries. Virtually indestructible, wherever great durability is desired, and wherever the window might be subject to stress, faceted glass is preferred. A faceted glass window contributes to the very strength of the building and could in fact be part of the sustaining wall of a building. Once more, about 1/4 of an inch of sand is sifted to cover the epoxy completely. About 1/8 of an inch of it will soak in and the rest remain on the surface as a finish. The drying or curing process takes from 1½ to 2 days. When the epoxy has dried, misplaced cement is chipped off the glass, the frame is removed, the edge is sanded for easier handling, and the window is ready to be carted to its destination for installation. For the artist who loves working with glass, but who doesn't enjoy the painstaking blending of lead and glass and painting and firing, faceted glass is the answer. The thick chunks of colored glass give a marvelous illusion of line and form, and faceting makes each individual piece a jewel in itself. There's a whole world of artistic expression still to be discovered in this field. New forms and shapes of the buildings in which we will dwell in the future, all made more beautiful by color and glass and imagination. We hope our film has whet your appetite to pursue the study of making of stained glass windows further. There is much, much more to learn than we've been able to show you in these few moments, in method, in practice. But even if our picture were 4 hours long, we still couldn't show the great and enduring sense of beauty and satisfaction derived from the creation of an exquisite work of art. When the famed French architect, Eugène Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc, was 7, his father took him for his first visit to the great Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The organ burst into music as his eyes caught the north rose window, and he shouted, "It sings, Papa! The window sings!" Listen, it really does.